You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron, live with Ethan Hristodoulou.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to more of the Greeks Gridiron. I am Ethan Hristodoulou, and today we're doing NFL picks and predictions for Week 6 of the NFL season, starting with tonight's matchup between the Washington Commanders, who are at 1-4, and the Chicago Bears, who are sitting at 2-3. So make sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, mainly because I'm posting a video in a couple of days that is going to be going over my MVP favorites so far through the first 5 weeks of this season, and I decided I could do it after tonight's game because I don't really have anyone in this game in mind that is an MVP candidate. So that'll probably be coming out Friday or Saturday, so make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on that. Now, let's dive in right to it. Picks for this week, my winners, some of my thoughts on the betting odds, and remember, I'm not a professional gambler. I'm just giving some of my thoughts and opinions. You do what you wish with those thoughts and opinions. Starting with the Commanders and the Bears here, we're looking at a low-scoring affair, I would say. When you're looking at the numbers for this one here, the over-under is currently set at 38, with Washington as minus half-point favorites here. I do not expect a ton of points in this game at all. Both offenses have been really struggling so far this season, with Chicago averaging about 17 points a game, and Washington only ahead of them by 1 point at 18 a game themselves. The biggest deciding factor really going into this game for me is just going to be the turnover situation here, because when you look at the numbers here and the way that both Washington and Chicago have played on offense and defense respectively, Washington, they're first in turnovers. They literally don't force any turnovers. And if you're going up against a Chicago team who, I don't want to say has turned the ball over a lot, but you know, could use some assistance in not having the threat of turning the ball over, you're the worst team in the league at forcing turnovers. Justin Fields is coming off of arguably his best game so far this season. I like the odds of Chicago. They're also forcing a fair amount of turnovers themselves this year. They already have 8. So with that in mind, I'm actually going to go with the Bears on this one here. So Bears plus half a point, 0.5, feels like a pretty good odd to go for in this one. It's also in Chicago, and Carson Wentz is dealing with an injury. They're also dealing with Logan Thomas being questionable, Jahan Dotson, Sam Cosmi, William Jackson, their corner. There's so many injuries and so many things falling into this game that just worry me about Washington. And, you know, when I was like really breaking it down, I was like, well, it's in Chicago. Bears are looking solid compared to what Washington has going on for them right now. Give me the Bears. I have them winning 20-17. Tight contest here. I don't think it's going to be a landslide. I don't think it's going to be a high-scoring affair. The over-under is set at 38. My point's set at 37 total at the end there. I don't really expect this to be a high-scoring one. So if you were like an over-unders person, the under feels like a safe bet in this one here. Going into our next matchup, we have the 49ers taking on the Falcons in Atlanta. And the Falcons 5-0 against the spread right now, as they are plus 5.5 favorites going into this game here. Well, the 49ers, I will say, probably one of the best teams defensively in the league so far. Their pass rush is just unbelievable. 21 sacks on the year. That's the best in the league. They're also at 63 total pressures on the season, which is third best in the league. They're allowing only 178 passing yards a game. They're allowing only 71 rushing yards a game and only 12 points a game. This defense, if it's not the best, it's the second best. And I don't really know, it maybe third at worst. And that just depends on whether you like them, the Bills, or the Cowboys defense at this point. Those are the 3 teams you're arguing as top. And the 49ers are definitely in that conversation. The Falcons, they've been a very fun team so far, but losing Cordell Patterson, I think, is going to hurt this team in the long run. A lot of their running game came through him. And then on top of that, you're looking at Drake London and Kyle Pitts as questionable going into this matchup here. I'm fairly worried about the Falcons going into this one. I'm not exactly like the highest person in the world on the 49ers offense, but I think the defense is what's going to keep them into this game here and really slow down the Falcons, who have been pretty solid. They're definitely no slouch. Like I said, one of the better rushing attacks in the league, 165 yards rushing per game, 7 total rushing touchdowns altogether. But like I said, Patterson was a big piece of that. He has 3 of those touchdowns and 340 of those yards off 58 carries. I like the 49ers, but I do like that Falcons plus 5.5. I feel like it's going to be closer than you might expect it to be, despite, you know, my worries that I have with questionable injuries and Cordell Patterson missing the game. But I like San Francisco. I have them winning 26-21. Again, another tighter matchup here, but Falcons plus 5.5 definitely seems doable for them in this one. Looking at the Patriots and the Browns here. Browns are -2.5 favorites going into this game here. The game is in Cleveland. This is kind of a toss-up for me because you have a team coming in with a backup quarterback in Bailey Zappi, but there's rumors swirling right now that Mac Jones might be playing. Now, if I had to guess, no one is going to know if Mac Jones is playing until 11:30 in the morning on Sunday. I would be legitimately shocked, to the point where Mac Jones could probably travel with the team just to keep that question up in the air, but them not give a definitive answer until it's game time and they have to put in that injury report prior to the game. So I don't really know who to go with. I will say that I am concerned with Cleveland right now. They're already missing linebacker Anthony Walker. He's been out on the IR for a while now. Myles Garrett is questionable. They're also dealing with Joe Bitonio, one of their offensive linemen, and Jadeveon Clowney is questionable again. I don't really know if the Browns are up to the task to win this game. I'd feel a lot better about the Patriots winning if Mac Jones was the one being the starting quarterback for this game. But because it's potentially still Bailey Zappi, I'm riding the fence, but I am riding the fence a little bit more so on the side of New England in this one. I have them winning 24-19. For me, it's just a matter of which quarterback really plays a cleaner game if it's between Zappi and Brissett. Both backup quarterbacks. You have two strong running games, two really good, solid to good defenses, depending on how you feel about both of them. I like the Patriots defense a little bit more, but there's a lot of things that are comparable going into this game here. If it's Mac Jones playing and he's healthy enough, I would definitely go with the Patriots all day, especially considering how well the Patriots did against the Browns last season in a very surprising blowout game that a lot of people thought was going to be a lot closer. And I ultimately like Bill Belichick a little bit more than I do the head coach of the Browns. So with that in mind, I am going to go with the Patriots 24-19. I like the Pats +2.5. I definitely think an upset victory with them is certainly possible. Now, looking at the Jets and the Packers here. This one, Jets, defensively, the last couple of games looking pretty solid, albeit they did play the Pittsburgh Steelers and a third-string quarterbacked Miami Dolphins team. They're allowing only 296 yards in these last two games, and they have 6 turnovers forced as well. Green Bay, not quite looking like themselves recently, with only 19.4 points a game so far this season. That ranks 22nd in the league, and they're only scoring on about 31% of their drives. So pretty much like every third drive they're getting into the end zone, maybe a little bit less than that. Sometimes it's their fourth, which is not great. That's tied for 25th in the league. I like the Jets defense. I really do. I think they're young. I think they're feisty. They're aggressive, and it's definitely starting to take shape under what I would believe Robert Saleh wants his team to look like on the defensive side of the ball. And looking at where the Jets are now after these last two games with Zach Wilson, I'm feeling a little more confident in them offensively, but I just don't know if I can take them over the Packers in Lambeau. When it really comes down to it, the defense of Green Bay is still really solid. They're only allowing 177 passing yards a game, second best in the league. They have 12 sacks on the year, makes them a little bit better than middle of the pack. The running game has been their issue on defense there. They are struggling with that, but ultimately, I just trust Aaron Rodgers and Matt LaFleur in their hometown than I do a New York Jets team that is at 3-2. Don't get me wrong, has surprised in a couple games here and there, but 2 of their wins coming over a Pittsburgh team that is in shambles right now and a Dolphins team that was pretty much in it until the end of the game, where a fumble and, a fourth down failure ended up kind of blowing the game up, and it ended up being a runaway by New York. I think I like the Packers. I have them winning 24-23 though. So I do like Jets +7.5 with this one. I think the Jets can hang in there and be fairly close. I just don't know if they can really get the job done. And I don't think with the way Green Bay's offense has been so far this year that they're really going to be blowing anybody out by any crazy numbers. They keep getting these really large spreads like the Patriots just a couple of weeks ago. And then with this game here, it's another possession or potentially 2. Interesting to me for whatever reason, despite the fact that the Packers just have not really been that explosive offensively. So I do like the Packers getting the job done in Lambeau. Looking at the Jaguars and the Colts here, this was a really hard one for me to go over because I really don't know who to pick here. You have the Jaguars, who have slipped after a pretty strong start to the season. They looked really good through the first 3 weeks, but these last couple of weeks, turnovers have been a massive issue for them. And then you have the Colts that are 2-1, coming off a couple of victories here, some much needed ones. I don't really know if I believe myself when I made this pick. I went with it because I'm just really uncertain about both these teams right now. Jacksonville is, and this is, I think, something of note, 0-4 in Indianapolis in the Frank Reich era. For all the jokes about, Jacksonville dominating Indianapolis in Jacksonville, it's like 0-8 now or 0-9, whatever the number is. It's a ludicrous number. Jacksonville has struggled themselves in Indianapolis since Frank Reich has gotten there. Also, the offense in Jacksonville right now, they are first in the league in drops from their receiving targets at 13, and Trevor Lawrence in just the last 2 weeks alone has 7 turnovers. So like I said, there's definitely an issue going on offensively over there in Jacksonville that's really slowing them down. I thought it was the rain against the Eagles, but now I'm starting to just think maybe it's something else and maybe something a little bit more where the team is just not in sync on the offensive side of the ball. The defense has not really been bad. It's just the offense is really holding them back. And that does concern me because the Colts offense has really not been great at all. They're the worst team in the league in terms of scoring. They have 21 sacks allowed. Matt Ryan is under pressure 27.1% of plays, so he's getting pressured at least every 4 downs, and Jacksonville pressures the quarterback fairly often. They pressure at about 26.4%, so I had a really hard time picking this, but the biggest thing for me is just I think the Colts can get the job done in Indianapolis. I have a low-scoring game, 19-17. The Colts are -1.5 favorites, so I did select that as my choice there. But this is a spread that I would stay away from. I don't really like the odds for this game because it could go really either way. I could see Jacksonville upsetting, but the Colts winning a tight contest or even just winning by 2 points in general seems very doable in Indianapolis. Looking at the Vikings and the Dolphins here. This one, I'm going to say this outright. I really don't have a ton written down about this one because I'm not really giving the Dolphins too much of a chance. With Skylar Thompson at quarterback, like I said, they were in it fairly late against the Jets, but that was the Jets. The Vikings offense is a really good unit, one of the most efficient in the league. Their third down conversion rate is at 43%, 7th best in the league. They're averaging 361 yards a game, and they're only averaging about a turnover a game on top of that. They're doing an excellent job protecting the football, getting into the end zone, keeping the chains moving, and the Dolphins are 0-2 since Tua has left. They've been outscored 67-32 in those 2 games since he's been out. I just have a really hard time feeling Miami in this game, even though it is in Miami, and a lot of people have been struggling in Florida this year that is not from that area, but we're starting to cool down now. We're in like mid-October at this point. It's not quite the 95 degrees, 100% humidity. At least I don't think it is still in Florida. Maybe it's cooled down a little bit. 85 degrees and 95 degrees at the end of the day. What is really the difference? I don't know. But I think that the Vikings get the job done. Minnesota's -3.5 favorites. I like that by a long shot. I actually have the Vikings winning 28-13. I don't really feel good about the Dolphins' chances with Skylar Thompson in at quarterback right now. I know Teddy Bridgewater returned to practice today, but I don't think he's playing on Sunday. I like the Vikings. I think they win, and they win fairly handedly, which is really unfortunate because the Dolphins have been a really fun team to watch. And then once Tua went down and Teddy Bridgewater literally goes down in like a play, it's just been a really unfortunate situation for Miami, considering their hot 3-0 start and the teams that they beat to get there. Looking at the Bengals and the Saints now, this is a really tough one as well because you have 2 teams that are in some interesting spots, but they're in like the similar boats of struggling, but probably should have been better than where they are right now. The Saints are 2-3, the Bengals are 2-3. And the biggest thing that sticks out to me when I compared these 2 teams and I looked at everything, New Orleans comes in with into this game with 14 people on their injury report of just questionables or out, whatever it may be. There is a lot to look at when you're staring at that injury report, and it's a lot of notable players. You have Landry on there, Thomas on there, Jameis Winston's on there, Kamara's on there, like you name it, someone's on there. Marshawn Lattimore on the defensive side. They have way too many people just dealing with something right now for me to really feel confident in them. They are a solid defense, not quite as good as they have been the last few years, and I think the injuries are starting to get after them a little bit, but I mean, they're only allowing 211 yards a game, which is 12th, 2 sacks a game. They do have 29 pressures, which is the 4th least, so while they're effective at slowing down the pass, they are not really bringing the quarterback down, which for the Cincinnati Bengals is huge because they just let everyone hit their quarterback. It just seems like since Joe Burrow has been under center, all they've wanted to do is let Joe Burrow get hit. And I don't know what that is all about, but it's just one of those things where I think injuries is probably the biggest concern I have for New Orleans. And on top of that, they have 13 turnovers this year. That's the most in the league. And Cincinnati, not the most in the league, but they have 8 turnovers forced on defense. I think with Andy Dalton at quarterback and some uncertainty and skill position at literally every spot on the Saints offense, I trust the Bengals a little bit more in this one. I do like the Bengals -2. I think that them winning by like 2-5 is definitely a realistic scenario here. My score line is 22-17. It's going to be a tighter game. I don't expect there to be a lot going on because Cincinnati has been struggling offensively and the Saints defense is pretty good, but it'll really come down to just how many people end up missing the game for New Orleans, because that is a laundry list of players. I didn't even write them all down. Go take a look at it. There is an awful lot of people in that game that are questionable and potentially set to miss time. Looking at the Ravens and the Giants, this was another one that took me a while, and I'm going with the upset on this one here. I'm going to come out and say it right now. I'm taking the Giants. They're 4-1 against the spread. I like them +6 for the upset victory. I have them winning 23-21. When I was really breaking both of these teams down, I was thinking, you have 2 excellent teams that can just bulldoze people over when it comes to running the football. You have the Baltimore rushing attack, 144 yards a game. They're 7th best in the league. The Giants are at 179 yards a game, 2nd best in the league. Baltimore is very efficient on offense, and I weighed them heavily, and I considered them for a long while, but being in New York and how solid the Giants defense has been this year, they're either like, depending on the statistic you're looking at, they're like middle of the pack or a little bit higher than that. And with Baltimore, they're efficient, but they've been up and down, and we've seen them stall out in some situations here. And it almost happened again this past week when they beat the Bengals in a comeback fashion. I'm a little bit concerned about them going into New York now. New York is hot. Saquon Barkley is playing as good as he's ever been at this point, probably the best in his entire career. Daniel Jones has looked really solid, even though he was playing on a bum ankle last week. They're starting to really figure things out, and it's the defense that I really like in New York to slow down Baltimore, give them some headaches, and get an upset victory. I'm probably going to regret this one later, but I have a feeling I like the Giants going into this matchup. For the Buccaneers and the Steelers, Buccaneers are -8 favorites going into this game here, and if there was ever one to hammer, it is the Buccaneers -8. I feel like the Steelers right now just can't catch a break. Brady is 9-3 against the Steelers all time in his career. This will be the first time he faces Pittsburgh since coming to Tampa Bay, but he is 9-3 during his time when he was in New England going up against them. I just think with them having a rookie quarterback over in Pittsburgh and the offensive line issues that they're having, and the running game is even starting to deteriorate a little bit here just because everyone knows kind of what's going on with Pittsburgh right now, and there's clearly a disgruntled feeling from players towards their offensive coordinator, Matt Canada. Tampa Bay has 19 sacks. That's 3rd best in the league. They have 54 pressures on the air. That's 5th best. They have 6 interceptions passing the football, or defending the pass, and 193 yards allowed per game through the air, which is also 6th best in the league. I just don't really see a scenario where the Pittsburgh Steelers come out in some massive upset fashion and win this game. I really like Kenny Pickett, and I would love to see him flourish over there in Pittsburgh, but I do not think this is the week, and now is not the time for that to happen. Looking at Carolina and the Rams, a game that has been advertised as a bye week for the Rams before their bye week. And to be fair, with a head coaching change going on and an offense that's averaging 18.6 points a game in Carolina, sure, you could say that if the Rams weren't averaging 16 points a game themselves, which is lower than the Panthers' average and 29th in the league. Listen, Rams are -10 favorites. It's in LA. I feel good about the Rams winning this game. It's a trap game. The Rams cannot come into this game thinking we're going to walk through a victory here and then get to the bye week. They need to come in and play for the win. You are currently 2-3 as the defending Super Bowl champions, and you are well into your Super Bowl hangover at this point, where it's rolling into the second day now, and you need to start taking some Tylenol and start eating some greasy food and getting yourself back together so you can start playing out the rest of this season. I think the Rams win. I have them winning 24-16. But don't get me wrong, I am slightly concerned with just how ineffective this offense has been. The running game has been almost non-existent for the Rams this year. I think they win, slightly concerned. Cardinals and the Seahawks, This was a tough one to decide because you have two teams right now in weird places. You have the Cardinals, who are 2-3. People probably expected them to be like 3-2 right now, maybe not 2-3, which isn't a massive difference, but maybe not struggling as much as they have been so far this year. They have a couple of insane victories too, with obviously the big comeback win against the Raiders being a good example of that. And then you have a Seahawks team that's 2-3, but feels like they're 3-2, with just how explosive their offense has been and how good Geno Smith has been passing wise. But when I looked at these two teams and I really broke them down, it's funny because you look at all the numbers and Seattle is pretty much ahead of Arizona in every like major offensive statistic. And then like you flip it for the defense and Arizona is leading in just about every major statistic there defensively. Seattle is really good when it comes to third down, and they score fairly often. 44.7% of their drives end up in the end zone. That's fifth best in the league, surprisingly enough. For a team that's 2-3, I don't know how that really works out until you look at just how bad the Seahawks defense is and how they can't stop a nosebleed. And I think that leads to a Cardinals victory here and a higher scoring affair. This is probably going to be the best game offensively for the Cardinals so far this season. I think they're going to get a good amount of points up on the board, and I think the Seahawks, while they are not going to necessarily struggle with what Arizona is doing, they did show some serious fight against the Eagles last week, so I want to give that defense some credit going into this game here. I think they might slow down the Seahawks in that awesome aerial attack they've been boasting, and that comes from out of nowhere. I don't think anyone's really been expecting, but I like the Cardinals. They're -2.5 favorites. I definitely think that's a possible one. This is one of those spreads that, again, I would probably stay away from because I could see Seattle pulling off a wild upset victory, but I feel safe in Arizona winning, and I have them winning 30-26, but definitely one that I would stay away from. The over-under for this one set at 50.5. I like that over on that one. I think this is going to be a very high-scoring affair, as you can see by my 56 points. That's definitely something that I could see happening. The Seahawks are good for like 26 or some odd points a game this season alone, and I think Arizona should be able to take advantage of a weak Seahawks defense in this game and finally get a decent amount of points up on the board. Looking at the Bills and the Chiefs, this is probably the headliner for a lot of people this weekend, and it's at 4:25 p.m. Eastern Time. I honestly cannot believe that the NFL somehow did not schedule this for Sunday Night Football, because we all know how much of a hard-on they have for both of these teams right now, and they're 4-1, but then Sunday night's football matchup, I mean, it worked itself out to be very good, but I just can't believe that this game in the scheduling didn't find its way into being prime time. But 4-1 Bills, 4-1 Chiefs in Kansas City. Bills are -2.5 favorites. I've got to say, when I put down the numbers for all this, and this is probably the one that I did the most looking into because this was one that I was really uncertain about going into the game. Kansas City, they have the most points scored a game at 31.8. Buffalo's sitting right behind them at 30.4. That's the first and second right there. The big difference maker when you flip it to the defensive side, Buffalo is allowing 12.2 points a game. That's the least in the NFL. And you say what you want about the people that they've played. They don't make the schedule. They just play it. Kansas City, on the other hand, they've allowed 25 points a game. That is a massive margin of difference right there. You're looking at about a 13-point swing in favor of the Bills' defense alone. Both defenses really solid against the run. Buffalo is second. Kansas City is third in terms of yardage allowed. In third down conversion rate, Buffalo Bills converting at 55.7% of their third downs. Kansas City right behind them at 52.5%. In terms of scoring drives, Kansas City is scoring every other drive right now. At 50%, they are getting a touchdown. That is an unbelievable number. Bills not too far behind them at 47.2%. When you look at the offense altogether in yards per game, 381 for KC. That's sixth in the league. Buffalo, they're best in the league at 440 a game. Both these teams can move the football. They can move effectively. They can find their way into the end zone. They don't settle for field goals. They tend to be putting a lot of points up in all of their games. The Chiefs are currently 3-1 in the Patrick Mahomes versus Josh Allen era. This is Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes, number 5. I'm excited for it. This one's going to be a close one. I think there's going to be a decent amount of points put up on the board. I know the Bills, this is probably their toughest task. And, you know, they've been looking forward to this game. And I know Kansas City's been looking forward to this game. If both these teams didn't circle this game on the calendar, I'd call you a liar if you told me that. I have the Bills taking the victory 31-28. I really am not positive about this one because I feel like in KC, this is a tough one for the Bills to win. But The Bills almost had them beat last year in that playoff game, and they beat them in the previous meeting 38-20. The Bills have gotten really good in the last year. The defense, one of the best in the league. Offense, one of the best in the league. The Kansas City defense is what's really concerning for me in this one here. Not quite as good as they were last year towards the back half of the season. And I'm curious to see how well they can defend such an elite group of skill players across the board, from wide receivers to tight end to running back over in Buffalo. Tight victory, 31-28. That means I like Bills at -2.5. I think they definitely get the job done. If you like Chiefs plus 2.5 and them just losing and maybe not winning outright, I could definitely see this game being like a 31-30 affair as well. This is one of those where you betting gurus, you go with what your gut feeling is on this one here. I'm not going to tell you which or what. I like Bills -2.5. I think they can win by a field goal. I definitely think that's possible, and I could see a scenario where they're kicking a field goal for the win. But that's how I'm feeling. Give me the Bills in a tight contest, and a crazy one at that. Final two contests, Sunday Night Football. We got the Cowboys heading over to Philadelphia to go up against the Eagles in a divisional matchup for the NFC East here. Dallas plus 6.5 favorites. Excuse me, not plus 6.5 favorites. Wow, Philadelphia minus 6.5 favorites here. I'm looking at a bunch of different numbers on my papers here. This was another tough one to decide on. There are some questionables on the Dallas injury report that concern me in Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence. Those are the two keys to the pass rush that they have over there in Philadelphia. But, I mean, aside from that, when you look at just like the numbers defensively of both of these teams, Dallas, first in pressures with 73, 20 sacks on the year. They're second behind only San Francisco. They're allowing only 194 passing yards a game, which is seventh. The key defensive note here is the rushing struggles that they've had. They are 19th in the league, allowing 118 yards rushing. And the reason I bring that up and emphasize it is because when you look at what the Philadelphia Eagles have done this season on the ground, they will beat you and beat you badly rushing the football, as they are averaging a league-leading 160 yards, or not league-leading, I'm sorry, I think that's third in the league. I lied. I forgot to write the number down, but I think that's third. They're allowing 160 or forcing 160 yards rushing on the ground and a league-leading 2.5 touchdowns on the ground per game. They can beat you on the ground, and we've seen some pretty solid performances now by Jalen Hurts passing through the air. He's had 3 touchdowns through the air in a game at this point. He threw for 300+ yards, I think, in that same game as well. My biggest question mark for this game really is going to be, can Dallas slow down the rushing attack? I think that Philadelphia is going to need to rely on their running game, because I don't expect them to really be able to put up massive numbers through the air. Like I said, Dallas, the best group when it comes to best or second best, whichever you prefer. It's them or the 49ers, because you're at that point, you're just flip-flopping pressures and sacks. But one of the best when it comes to defending the pass in the league. I think it might give them some fits. It sounds like Jordan Mailata might be coming back for the Eagles, which would be massive for them going up against a defensive front that is as imposing as Dallas is. But also, when I weigh these two teams out, I do like Jalen Hurts more than I like Cooper Rush. I understand he's 5-0 as a starter, and he's 4-0 this season. But I do think I like the Eagles just a little bit more. I have them winning 27-23. And I do like the Dallas plus 6.5 for this game here. I don't think that Philadelphia is going to approach like beating them by 7 or more. I think that's a little bit high for what this game should actually be. I know that their defense is really good in Philadelphia. They're definitely no slouches themselves. They've got 60 pressures on the season, 17 sacks. They're only allowing 189 passing yards a game, which is better than what Dallas is averaging. And they're really good when it comes to defending the run. 105 yards a game, 10th in the league. I mean, Philadelphia is no slouch themselves. I don't think it's a high-scoring affair, but I don't think either team could potentially run away with it in this game. Give me the Eagles, 27-23. Dallas plus 6.5, them losing within that 6.5 margin feels like something I could see happening. Or maybe the upset victory and they steal one. Definitely something I feel is the most likely of those. And then for the final matchup, we have the Denver Broncos taking on the LA Chargers in what should be, I want to say a fun contest, but it's really going to boil down to just have the Broncos figured it out on offense. The Broncos boast a really good defense. The Chargers offense is obviously one of the better in the league when it comes to passing, 291 yards a game. That's second best in the league. They're averaging about 24.5 points a game as well, puts them in the top 10. They're well below, not well below, excuse me. They're on the far lower side of turnovers at 0.8 a game right now. Not even one turnover a game on average. That's fourth best in the league, and they're scoring at about 40% on the drive. So with that in mind, here's the deal. For Denver, their defense is definitely going to have to slow down LA, but if they think they can get away with putting up 9 points and carrying a game into overtime on the back of their defense against the Chargers like they did against the Colts last week, no shot. They're going to have to figure something out on the offense, and it's got to start this week. The Broncos are in a tough place at 2-3. The Chargers, if they want to keep those playoff hopes alive and keep the gap tight with the Chiefs, and they have an opportunity now, if KC loses based off my picks here and they get a victory, that puts them at both at 4-2. Obviously give KC the tiebreaker, but you're in a much better spot of potentially securing a number 1 seed down the road. So Denver's got to figure it out offensively. Chargers are minus 4.5 favorites going into this one here, and I really don't know if I can go with Denver in this game. Like, I want to believe in them, and I want to believe that maybe their defense can get it together, and they can, well, not their defense, excuse me, their offense can get it together, and the defense doesn't have to carry so much of the load. But I just feel like right now it's too lopsided from one side carrying way too much of the load in Denver. I like the Chargers, and I have them winning pretty handedly. I have them up 21-10 for the victory. LAC minus 4.5 feels pretty good. Do I think the Broncos could keep this game closer? Maybe. I don't really see them pulling off an upset, although it is a divisional matchup and crazy things happen. I just have a really hard time buying the Broncos right now. And that's just how I feel. It is what it is. But I go with Chargers. I think they get a victory here. I think it's a tight matchup. No, not a tight matchup. I think it's a within reason matchup. I think the Broncos maybe hang around, but ultimately the Chargers maybe kick a field goal to make it 2 possessions late. Maybe they score a touchdown late to separate the difference. That's at best case scenario for Denver. At worst case, the Chargers completely blow them out of the water. I just don't really feel the Broncos going into this game here after watching the way they choked up a game against the Colts last week. But those are my picks for this week's matchup and slate of games. I appreciate you guys for sticking all the way through. If you did, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Remember, we're talking MVPs later on this week, whether it's Friday or Saturday. I have not really decided yet, but know that we're going to have a little conversation about that coming up. So make sure you keep your eyes open and peeled for that sometime late this week or this weekend. Appreciate y'all. I'll catch you next time. Have a good one.